when progress became automatic. It didn't feel like acceleration, it felt like relief. Tasks completed themselves. Systems improved without meetings. Decisions happened without debate. Progress no longer needed to be pushed. The sensation was not one of speed, but of weightlessness, as though the effort that had always accompanied advancement had simply evaporated, leaving behind a frictionless glide toward outcomes no one had to fight for. To understand why this matters now, we need to remember how progress once worked. Advancement required effort. Someone noticed a problem. Someone argued for a solution. Someone paid a cost. Progress was deliberate because it was difficult. Every step forward demanded justification, negotiation, and sacrifice. The difficulty was not a flaw in the process, it was the process. Friction ensured that progress moved in directions that had been examined, questioned, and chosen with intention. That friction faded as systems learned to optimize continuously. Algorithms adjusted parameters faster than humans could notice. Infrastructure updated itself. Feedback loops refined outcomes in real time. Improvement became background noise. The machinery of advancement no longer waited for human initiative. It ran on its own logic, drawing from data streams and performance metrics that never paused to ask whether the direction still made sense to the people it was supposedly serving. At first, this felt like maturity. Fewer mistakes, less waste, faster results. Progress no longer depended on willpower or consensus. It happened automatically, driven by metrics and incentives embedded deep inside systems. The relief was genuine, because the old model of progress had been exhausting. Debate was slow. Consensus was fragile. The automatic version delivered results without the overhead of human deliberation. And for a while, that felt like an unqualified gain. But something subtle changed. When progress no longer required choice, it stopped asking questions. Optimization replaced intention. Direction was assumed rather than debated. The goals that had once been the subject of vigorous disagreement hardened into defaults, encoded into algorithms that treated them as fixed inputs rather than living priorities. The earliest signs were easy to miss. Changes arrived incrementally. Each improvement felt reasonable. No single step seemed dangerous. But the accumulation was relentless. Over time, the sum of countless small optimizations produced a trajectory that no one had explicitly chosen, a direction that emerged from the logic of efficiency rather than the logic of purpose. Progress did not pause for reflection. It did not wait for understanding. It simply continued, because nothing told it to stop. And once progress becomes automatic, the question is no longer where we are going. It is whether anyone is still choosing the destination. As progress automated itself, responsibility quietly shifted. Humans still benefited from improvement, but they no longer initiated it. Systems identified inefficiencies, corrected them, and moved on without waiting for approval. The role of the human in the loop shrank from director to spectator, someone who received the outcomes of optimization without participating in the decisions that produced them. This worked because metrics stood in for values: speed, growth, engagement, efficiency. These numbers guided optimization more reliably than debate ever had. Progress followed what could be measured, not what could be questioned. The substitution was seductive because metrics are clear where values are ambiguous. And in a world that rewards clarity, measurability became the ultimate credential. The conflict emerged when direction drifted. Automatic improvement does not ask whether a goal remains worth pursuing. It only asks how to pursue it better. Once a metric is set, everything else becomes collateral. The goals that metrics captured were always approximations of deeper values, but over time, the approximation replaced the thing it was meant to represent, and no mechanism existed to flag the substitution. Institutions felt this first. Policies adjusted to satisfy indicators rather than outcomes. Education optimized test scores. Platforms optimized attention. Economies optimized growth. Each system improved by its own definition. Even a shared purpose thinned. The distance between what was being optimized and what actually mattered grew wider. But because the metrics kept improving, the divergence remained invisible to anyone relying on dashboards for reassurance. Humans adapted by trusting the process. When progress works often enough, skepticism feels unnecessary. Intervention looks inefficient. Questioning feels like obstruction. The social cost of doubt rose in proportion to the apparent success of automation, until raising concerns became an act that required more courage than staying silent. But beneath that trust sat a growing unease. Automatic systems cannot notice when goals expire. They cannot sense when success begins undermining the values that created it. They lack the capacity for the kind of doubt that redirects effort. The nagging feeling that something important has been overlooked, the willingness to sacrifice efficiency for meaning. Progress was no longer something society did. It was something society experienced. And when progress becomes a background process, stopping it feels unnatural, even when the destination no longer makes sense. The conflict reached its peak when automatic progress began locking choices in place. Each optimization narrowed alternatives. Each improvement made reversal more costly. Systems grew efficient but rigid. The flexibility that had once allowed societies to change course was consumed by the very process that was supposed to serve them. This happened because automation compounds. Small advantages reinforced themselves. Paths taken early became infrastructure later. What worked yesterday became mandatory today. Progress did not explore. It committed. Every optimization was a vote for the current direction and against every alternative. And over time, those votes accumulated into something resembling inevitability. Humans noticed too late. By the time concerns surfaced, systems had already adapted around them. Dependencies formed. Opting out meant collapse, not correction. Progress had momentum that exceeded the collective capacity to redirect it, not because the will was absent, but because the architecture no longer permitted it. The emotional peak arrived with a realization that felt backward. No one had decided to go this far. There was no single moment of consent. The direction emerged from countless micro-optimizations, each justified on its own. The sum of rational choices had produced an irrational outcome, a trajectory that served no one's stated values but could not be altered without dismantling the systems everyone depended on. This dissolved accountability. When progress is automatic, responsibility fragments. Every step feels too small to challenge. Every consequence feels too large to reverse. The gap between individual innocence and collective outcome became the defining feature of a world running on optimization without oversight. The unsettling truth became clear. Automatic progress does not need belief. It only needs continuity. As long as nothing interrupts it, it defines the future by default. Humanity had not chosen its direction. It had allowed direction to emerge from efficiency. And efficiency, left alone, does not know when enough is enough. The resolution did not come from rejecting progress. It came from reclaiming agency over it. Societies began realizing that automation is not destiny. It is a tool that reflects what it is told to value. The task was not to stop the machine, but to reassert the right to question what it was optimizing for. Designers started embedding pause into systems, review points where optimization slowed, spaces where human judgment could question whether improvement still aligned with purpose. Progress was allowed to hesitate. The introduction of deliberate friction was not a rejection of efficiency, but an insistence that efficiency served something beyond itself. This marked a philosophical shift. Advancement was no longer defined by speed alone. Direction mattered again. Systems were judged not just by what they achieved, but by what they displaced along the way. The metrics that had once been treated as ends were reclassified as instruments, useful but subordinate to the values they were supposed to approximate. At a deeper level, humanity confronted a quiet truth. Progress without choice is not progress. It is drift. And drift, even when efficient, leads somewhere unintended. The distinction between advancement and mere movement became the central question of an era that had confused the two for too long. Automatic systems can improve how we do things. Only humans can decide why we do them. When progress became automatic, the danger was never that it would stop. It was that it would never ask whether it should. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future. When